Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'm painting the sleeping head I got for Little Rune, my Minifee Seorin. This ended up being an interesting challenge of a face-up because I accidentally left the cap off my Vallejo sealant I used on the open-eyed head, so it got gooey, and I decided to use up a can of Mr. Super Clear instead. This head had some repair work done to one eye, undoing an eye-opening modification the previous owner had started, and he was also airbrushed to match the dyed doll body and the open-eyed head. I still had a jar containing the paint I used on the open-eyed head, so I didn't have to mix anything. I just airbrushed and got started painting with black gouache for the lid lines. The airbrushing is a little uneven around the edges of the head and around the back of the neck. I didn't worry about those much since they're going to be covered anyway. The paint also has a slightly satin texture, so it reflects light a little oddly with my big umbrella lights on it, but he looks better in person, I promise. Between the lips, I use some brown gouache to help define the mouth, and then I move on to eyelashes. I give him thicker lashes than the open-eyed head has, because his eyes are closed, right? So you'd see those upper eyelashes against the cheek too, and not just the lower ones. So I go for more lashes and slightly longer lashes, using the same brown as what I used on the mouth to add those, and also some crease lines on the eyelids. Same paint for the eyebrows, and honestly, I felt like I kinda brought my A game for line work today because the brows turned out just the way I wanted on the very first try. Thus far, it felt like the face-up was going pretty well. Kind of concerningly well if you ask me, so after I sealed the paint and started blushing was where I started noticing the problem. So Mr. Super Clear has one notorious issue when it comes to tan resins, and it applies to this airbrushed head too, that it tends to frost. This day in particular, I was using the UV Cut MSC, which has some protection against fading and such, but it seems to give an even stronger frost haze than the regular MSC. This issue means each layer of sealant also adds a hint of white film. It's not really a problem on lighter resin, it isn't strong enough to be noticeable, but by the time I'm working on his blushing, he's got 5 layers of UV Cut MSC on him already, and the haze is definitely starting to show. This means this head will be severely discolored compared to his body, and also to his open-eyed head, and that's going to have to be addressed. I tried something a little different for this setup here, hoping I could get my pastel palette in frame and also the head, but it ended up being too hard for me to have both, so I'm going to have to readjust my placement of things if I do this again after this batch of face-ups. Another issue with the haze in the MSC that you might notice is that it really dulls the colors of the pastels I'm using too, which means I'm going to need more layers of blushing, which in turn means more layers of MSC, so more haze and more discoloration washing out the base color of the head. By now, there are 7 layers of sealant on the sleeping head, and you can see the huge difference in color between it and the more golden tan open-eyed head, which matches the body almost perfectly. Something's got to be done, but for now I have to finish this 3rd layer of blushing, then we'll see what we can do. As I blush the eyebrows, I use a piece of magic eraser sponge to clean up the edges, since I think it'll be a little more gentle on this rather troublesome face-up, and I don't want to do anything to risk accidentally scratching the face, since he's airbrushed. I would have to strip all this off and start over from scratch, and we don't want to do that. After the 3rd layer of pastel is sealed, I check the open-eyed head against my low Cornell pastels to see how warm of a color correction I need to do. I personally feel it's important to use a more chalky, less pigmented brand of pastel for this because it's got to cover a lot, and it's easier to build smooth color with something less intense. Even though the primary issue is the doll's head not being golden enough, using a golden yellow would lean too yellow when it's applied over the dark resin, so I go to a shade warmer than what looks best next to the open-eyed head and pick an orange pastel. This gets powdered up, and then I apply the orange pastel over the entire head. It looks a little odd at first, but this is very much one of the instances of trust the process. I know it looks a little funny on video because of the way this paint reflects light, but it looks great in person. You can see how quickly just one incomplete layer of blushing takes him back in the color direction we want to go, but it's important that I saved this for the last layer of blushing that goes onto the doll. We don't want this to end up being washed out by putting tons of layers of MSC over it, so after the orange is on, I add some more red tones around his eyes and cheeks and apply some purple to his lips, which looks more burgundy when it's against his dark resin. That gets sealed once. Then I add the last touches, like white gouache lip lines that get softened with a little more purple blushed over the top. He can have his final layer of sealant now, and here's how the 2 heads look together. It's still not exactly the same color as the open-eyed head, but it's much closer than it was. And even though it turned out a tiny bit darker and less smooth because of how many layers of blushing it took, I think it's close enough that I can be happy with this end result. And that's all for today though. Thanks for watching. Bye.